very excited to be here at Agrohack. And as Carlos said, my name is Ken Neilson, and I'm from the island of St. Thomas. I own a hydroponic container farm on the island. And today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges we faced getting started, how we overcame them. And I think just like here in Puerto Rico, we face one of the greatest challenges, which is trying to change people's minds about something that has been done for a very long time. And so I hope that our experiences will help you to get your business running, whatever it may be, and to get going. So a little bit about me. I originally come from an area of upstate New York in the northeast of the United States called the Hudson Valley. Very rich in agriculture. I was very lucky to have fresh fruits and vegetables every year growing up. I moved to Boston, Massachusetts, and I moved there for college. I went to Wheaton College in Massachusetts, and afterwards I received my master's in business from Babson College, just outside of Boston. It is one of the country's #1 entrepreneurial schools. And while there, I worked for several very large companies, Staples, Best Buy, but I also worked for some very small technology companies. So I got a very good breadth of range from large companies to small companies. And the one thing between all these companies that stayed the same was I always worked in disruptive technologies or disruptive marketplaces. So there was always a focus on changing the way things were normally done and making a system more efficient. 4 years ago, I moved to St. Thomas with my beautiful wife, and we started Crate Crops, our farm, about 2 years ago. Most people would say, why didn't you start the farm where it's nice and green or in the Boston, but we decided to wait till we got to the Caribbean to start a farm. As I mentioned, our farm is a hydroponic container farm. We have these 40-foot freight containers. They are manufactured by a company called CropBox in North Carolina. We work very closely with the team at CropBox. Our container was the first one to be manufactured and shipped overseas to St. Thomas. So we worked very closely with them on the design to make the changes that were needed for the shipping. One of the great things about working with this team, and it's a piece of advice I want to give anybody that's starting something new, that's trying to do something that's trying to change the norm, is they have been a wonderful partner. They've been invested in our success, not just in the sales. And if you're going to do something, you're going to try and change, you need partners like that. So I really want to impart that on everybody here. We'll talk a little bit more about the farm and exactly how it works a few slides later. So why did we get into what we're doing? As I mentioned, my wife and I are from the northeast United States. So having fresh produce and having access to fresh produce was something that we'd become very accustomed to. When we moved to St. Thomas, we were shocked to see things like this in our stores. And this has happened 3 times in just the last 6 months, where a ship failed to leave the port out of Miami, or broke down and was sidelined here to Puerto Rico, or a shipment just didn't get sent at all. And more we talked to people on our island, we found that a lot of people were just sort of accustomed to this. They kind of were just said, well, that's the way it is, it's the islands. But we were not used to this, so this was a shock. And that's where we began to see some opportunity, possibly a chance to change something that everybody else had gotten used to, but maybe we saw a way to slip in and change. So we began doing some research. And as we began doing research, we started to see numbers like these. And the more we saw numbers like these, the more we thought, wow, there are a lot of inefficiencies in the system. I mean, if this is true, there's so many places we could change, so many places we could make it better. And as we started researching and we started learning about the supply chain and the fact that a lot of our produce, nearly 99% of our produce on our island comes from off-island, comes from elsewhere, we began realizing now, if this is how it works and this is what people have gotten used to, how do we change their minds? How do we get them thinking differently? And what do we have to do to change the system? As we were researching, a real aha moment for us came when we were researching the urban agriculture movement in big cities like New York, Boston, Seattle. And we began to see that they were really pushing for solutions to problems that we were actually having on our island as well. These big cities weren't all that different from our little island. They wanted produce faster, they wanted it fresher, they wanted to get it from the farm to the table in higher quality, higher yield, cheaper prices, very similar. And right about this time, we saw the money that was going into the marijuana industry up in the United States. Lots and lots of money going into research and new technologies, new supply chains, and we thought, well, maybe we can take all the money they're putting into all these new solutions, and maybe we can borrow some of that to solve some of our problems on our little island. So, how did we do this? First, we talked, and we listened, and we asked lots of questions, and we did it over and over. We talked to chefs. We talked to restaurant owners. We talked to distributors. We talked to grocery store owners. We talked to people who had lived on the island their whole lives, and we talked to people who had only lived there for a few months. We tried our best to understand exactly where the problems were, exactly where the pressure points were, and maybe where we could change them. We also did our research. We went out and we started learning about new technologies. We started learning about hydroponics. A book, if anybody's interested in hydroponics, I suggest you read Hydroponic Farming by Howard Resch. He's done a lot of work down here in the Caribbean and on the island of Anguilla. Excellent read. And so we started visiting manufacturers. At the time, there were only 3 or 4 manufacturers really developing these types of farm container units. And we went out and we visited them. We met with the manufacturers. We met with farmers. We went out and we talked and we asked the questions and we said, hey, here's what we're trying to do. What can you do for us? And then we took all this information and we went back and we began to crunch the numbers. And we went through it. And eventually we realized we had to take the leap. Either we tried this, there's only so much you can do, only so much talking you can do, only so much research. We had to take the leap and we had to jump in. So I mentioned our container. We settled on CropBox. We worked with them. They were great partners. They were really welcoming. And we finally decided to put it in order and buy our first CropBox. And when we got it down to Island, we couldn't have been happier. It's an amazing piece of technology. It is a 40-foot freight container, completely retrofitted to have a hydroponic farm inside. It's an enclosed container, so we control every aspect of the environment, from the humidity to the CO2 to the temperature. We have planting spaces for 3,000 plants, and we're able to grow everything inside, so we use far less resources. We use less water. We use less fertilizer. We use no pesticides, no herbicides. We're able to get greater yields out of it because we're able to get more harvests. In 320 square feet of space, that's how much our container takes up, we're able to grow as much food as an acre's worth of traditional farming. And depending on the species of plants, we've actually seen yields even higher, almost as high as 2 acres to that 320 square feet. So this has been a real, solved a lot of the problems we saw in terms of the supply chain getting to the island. But getting it to the island turned out to be the easiest part of setting up our farm. We thought when it first arrived and got into port and we checked it through customs, we were so excited and we thought for sure in 2 weeks we'd be supplying everybody with fresh vegetable and everybody would be happy and all the problems would be solved. And it didn't happen at all. Not at all like that. Our challenges really fit into 2 key categories, 2 very broad categories. The first was infrastructure. We learned very quickly that there were challenges around electricity, water, and land, much more so than we'd foreseen. We thought we'd been able to see everything, but there was much more. And the second is what I like to call stubborn perceptions. And this is something that I think every entrepreneur can relate to. It's changing the minds of people who are stuck on a way of doing something because you want them to see that there are other ways to do it. There are changes that they can make to make it more efficient, make it more fluid. So the infrastructure. Our container, obviously being contained, uses grow lights for the plants, so we're very electricity heavy. Our electric company is called WAPA, the Water and Power Authority, and we did a lot of research into exactly what their plans were for the future. I mean, if we're bringing something down that uses a lot of electricity, we got to make sure we're not going to have any blackouts, right? And every electrical engineer we spoke to said, you know, it's only going to get more reliable. They're changing from oil to gas. There's prices going to come down, less blackouts. Well, these are some of the headlines that have come out in just the last few months. It's gotten less reliable. The price is starting to creep up. They switched back to oil. You can't plan for everything. There's just always going to be something that goes wrong and you're going to change. And luckily, we're able to mitigate this issue by having a generator. We spoke with our manufacturer. We discussed ways to change our load so that we were never really at peak power, that we were able to change up the systems and not use quite as much. But the point is, you always have to be fluid. Even if you plan very, very well, things are always going to come up. And many more things came up. We found it actually to be very difficult to find land. Initially, we thought, hey, it's just a container. We could put this anywhere. Super easy. But finding land that had the right water requirements, had the electrical requirements, had the right permitting, that had the right leasing, very difficult. And weeks very quickly turned into months. And we were starting to worry, and then finally found space. And it was great. It was perfect. It was beautiful. And we started working with the electric company to bring electricity, and we had a lease for water. Everything looked great, and we were robbed. We were broken into, and they stole our computer system. They stole some electrical components, and it was looking very bad. We really thought, maybe this was a mistake. Maybe we shouldn't have gotten into this. Maybe this is something we shouldn't have done. We should stop now. We should try something else. And my wife actually looked at me that day, and we're standing outside the container. She said, listen, do you want to keep doing this? Because if you don't, it's okay. We can do something else. I will support you either way. And I looked at her and I said, I've never wanted to do this more in my life. I will not give up. We will keep going. And we did. And a few weeks later, somebody that we'd spoken to when we did our research and we were talking about everything on island, called me up and said, hey, I just bought some land. It's got electricity. It's got water. There's a reverse osmosis plant. It's got a gate. We've got cameras. Love what you're doing. Would you like to take a look if you haven't found a place yet? It was amazing. It was perfect. We picked up the container. We moved it to the new spot. We've been operating there ever since. And we only were able to find it because we kept going. We didn't give up. And that is such an important piece of entrepreneurship, is to not give up. Even when things look their worst, you can only go up, and then things will only get better. The second challenge, stubborn perceptions. This might be more difficult than the first. Changing people's minds, changing the way people think of things that have just been done that way for decades. I know if there's people here who have tried to introduce a new system or tried to introduce a new product or try to do different things differently, I know you've seen some of these phrases. I heard all of them. Very discouraging. This hurt. This hurt. And I started asking myself, how do I do this? How do I change their minds? How do I change the status quo? And there's really only one way you can change the status quo. You have to prove yourself. You have to get out there. But how do you prove yourself? How do you go about doing that? Well, there's two ways that we did it. The first is our proof of concept, and that was our container farm. We purchased it. We brought it down, we got through the infrastructure challenges, and we got it up and running. We began growing everything we could. We were growing kale, basil, lettuce, cabbages. We were growing types of flowers. We were growing spinach. Absolutely everything we could because we were still learning. So we were proving it by growing all these things. We were proving our capabilities. And we would take our product and we'd give it away. We gave it to chefs. We gave it to restaurant owners. We gave it to customers. We gave it to grocery stores. We showed them our proof of concept and we put it in their hands and said, here it is. This is what we've been talking about, and here it is. But we didn't stop there. We educated as well. I didn't just go to a chef and say, here's the best produce you've ever seen, the best head of lettuce, $10, and sell. I said, would you like to see where this came from? Please, come with me back to my farm. Let me show you what we do. And I invited everybody back. I said, hey, let me show you how we do this. And I would bring them into the farm, and I'd show them the nutrients we used. I'd show them the lights we used. I showed them the computer system we were using. I went through the whole process with them, and I educated them. And what that did was it brought their imaginations alive. Now suddenly, they're understanding more. They're seeing, they're believing, and they're starting to understand. And they started saying to me, well, wait, if you can do this, can you grow that? And you know, when I used to work up in the United States, we had this. And I said, yes, let's try. Let's try it. I haven't done that yet, but I want to try it with you. And now suddenly, they were more than just partners. They were more than just customers, they were partners. They were invested. They wanted to see what we could do. They would call me up and say, hey, how's that red vein sorrel we asked you to grow? How's that coming along? Can I come by and see it? I'm like, yes, please, come on. It's just a little seedling still, but I want you to see it. I want you to see where it is in every stage of growth. And I got people excited, imaginations. This is how you change minds. This is how you change the status quo and you change perceptions. You educate them, you show them, you work with them, you make them your partner, more than just your customer. So I'm happy to say it's worked very well. We're now working with over 10 restaurants in St. Thomas. We are at 100% capacity, 110% capacity. We've had to turn people away. We're just absolutely cannot supply enough for our demand. We are working with restaurants. We are working with a distillery on St. Thomas. They're using our basil and their gin that they just launched. We are working with retail customers and getting herbs and fresh produce into the retail space. And every chef I have worked with has come to me and said, this is the best produce I have seen. I know there was a gentleman earlier from Arrow Farms that was talking about the produce that they're bringing out of their facility. And it's true. I mean, these hydroponic facilities, these hydroponic processes really produce some amazing stuff, and people notice. And it's been just fantastic. So looking ahead, we really see a lot of opportunity, and we're very, very excited. We've had a couple of developers approach us recently about taking our farm systems and making it a part of their developments in order to have a proper farm-to-table concept within what they're doing. We are looking to expand right now. We're looking to bring down more containers, have some more land. We're always experimenting. We never stop. We always keep a small space in the container for just, maybe we'll try a different type of flower or nasturtiums or a different type of cabbage, or can we get hops? Can we get strawberries? What's the next step? We're always experimenting, and we're always working with our manufacturer on the next thing. What is he working on? Where can we help? Can we give them any information? Can we share anything? Data, information, it's the only way to change. It's the only way to keep going. We're working with corporate partners. We're actually working with the Ritz-Carlton on St. Thomas. We've been supplying them with produce, and we're working out a system to perhaps have a farm on their property. And, of course, community involvement. We have the headmaster of the Montessori school in St. Thomas is now getting involved. We're getting teachers over. We're trying to develop school programs, perhaps bring some students in to help work at the farm, but also create some programs for them. Community involvement's always been a part of our greater business model, so we always want to get that involved. So in closing, I guess what I'd like to leave you with is that we're a small company, and we started our company without any previous knowledge of agriculture or farming. And I'm very happy to say we're doing very, very well, and we really see a lot of positive opportunity in the future. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you're trying to do something that hasn't been done before, or you're trying to go against the grain because you feel strongly about it, don't give up. There is going to be a time when you feel like it just isn't working, or maybe you've made a terrible mistake. And maybe you have. But if you have a strong foundation, if you've worked, you've studied, you've talked, and you've got good partners, that's the foundation you need to move forward, and don't quit. So thank you very much. Please follow us, USVI. And if you're ever on St. Thomas and anybody ever wants to come by, please contact us. We'd love to share. Thank you.